I love the 1980s. Now, we typically tend to love the generation and the age that we grew up in. Myself, being a child of the 80s, I love the 80s music. I love the 80s television shows. The sports teams that I cheered for achieved great success in the 1980s. But one thing that I truly remember about this decade was the leadership that we had. Today, I want to commemorate President Ronald Reagan. Now, I was just 4 years old when he was elected, so many of his early days I do not recall much. But one thing that I do recall, even as a young child, was the security that I felt with him in leadership. It felt like that he could be trusted. It felt like that he had a great vision for our nation. And even at a young age, I recall when hostages were being held, when he took office, they were released shortly. Now, there's been, of course, a historical debate how much Jimmy Carter played into that as opposed to Reagan. But in my memory, it was Ronald Reagan came into office and the hostages were released. He was there for our nation. When I was in 5th grade, I recall the gym teacher coming into our classroom and making mention that the Space Challenger had exploded. Our nation then turned to President Reagan and heard his words of comfort as he spoke to the nation about this great tragedy. Another thing that I really loved about Reagan was his wit and humor. When the assassination attempt was made on him, as he was being carried into emergency surgery, he looked up at the doctors and made the statement, "I hope you're all Republicans." Of course, the doctor said at that point in time that today everybody is a Republican. When the debates were going on, the question was asked to President Reagan by the moderator concerning age. He looked over his opponent, Walter Mondale, and made the statement to some degree that I will not, for any political reasons, exploit the youth and inexperience of my opponent to gain in this election. He had another instance where age became a factor when he was speaking of President Bill Clinton, who was just campaigning at the time. The issue became as to people were talking about Bill Clinton and calling him the next Thomas Jefferson. Reagan, once again, kind of making a joke about his age, he said, "I knew Thomas Jefferson. We were good friends." And Bill Clinton, Governor Clinton, is no Thomas Jefferson. All of those things that he did, just really his lightheartedness and the comments that he was able to make would seem to ease the tension that would happen oftentimes. Another thing that made President Reagan great in my mind is the display of power and the belief that he had that this was a great country. It's not often, I don't believe any other time in my lifetime I've heard a leader of a nation make a statement to another leader of another powerful nation as he did to Mr. Gorbachev. When he made that statement, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." And we know even though it didn't happen during his presidency, the Berlin Wall did eventually come down. So all those things made him the things that he would do to display power. There was another instance where he went to meet with President Gorbachev, and to show that America had a powerful leader, that we had a great strength. When he left the limo, he was not wearing a coat, and of course with the weather situation being extremely cold as it is in Moscow, it amazed the Soviet people that this leader had walked out of the limo not even wearing a coat. Why? Because he wanted to show the power that our country had. So when I look at his life, when I look at the things that he contributed, I just really think about that belief that he had in the great things that our country can accomplish. When he gave his final address to the American people, he spoke of the City on a Hill by John Winthrop. He spoke of America as a great beacon of light that people could look to, people from all backgrounds could come and experience the freedom and everything that we have here. That's what made our country great, and he had a strong belief in that. Now, there are many people today that look to him as a role model for what we need in a leader in our country today. That's not to say that every president that we've had since Ronald Reagan has failed. There have been some great things that each president has done following him, and some not so great things. Just as not everything that he did in his administration may not have been the right thing. But there is just something about him that when people look to him, they could say, "That is my leader, that is my president," and I believe that we as a country together can pull our country out of anything, just as the state that our nation was in with the economy and everything else that went on at the beginning of his administration. We can pull through that. We did it back then, but as Americans, we can unite together and do the same thing today. And that's the belief that Ronald Reagan had in this great nation. Thank you.